drive to aid the private relief agencies, stated, "Time and time again, the American people have demonstrated a spiritual quality of generosity. This civilization, which we call American life, is builded and can alone survive upon the translation into individual action of that fundamental philosophy announced by the Savior 19 centuries ago. Modern society cannot survive with the defense of Cain. Am I my brother's keeper?"
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, increasingly, we are hearing the left criticize former President Donald Trump for his name-calling and his characterization and demeaning of people. Yet on a recent CNN interview, Vice President Kamala Harris was asked by Anderson Cooper if Donald Trump was a fascist. Here's her response.
You've quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump a fascist. You yourself have not used that word to describe him. Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted. Again, look at their careers. These are not people, with the exception, I think, of only Mike Pence. These were not politicians. These are career people who have served in the highest roles in national security, who have served as generals in our military.
So
we're highly respected.
The word fascism is a reference to a government led by a dictator, having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism. Donald Trump has been compared to Hitler, to Stalin, to Mussolini, very evil men. There are tactics that have been used in the past, such as gaslighting and projection. Could it be that these tactics are being employed today? Joining us here for a second day, we welcome back William J. Federer, a nationally known speaker, historian, author, and president of AmeriSearch Incorporated. Bill is a speaker on the American Minute daily broadcast, authored several books, including Socialism, how the deep state capitalizes on crises to consolidate control, and the newly released Silence Equals Consent, the Sin of Omission. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Jim. Great to be with you.
So before we talk about some of the current events going on, let's just talk about these terms like gaslighting and projection. What's the history to these?
Right. Well, projection is a psychological term for blaming your opponent of what you're guilty of. The attacker blames the victim, blame shifting. It's in the Bible. Potiphar's wife accused Joseph of lusting after her when she was lusting after him. And so it's a narcissistic response mechanism. When somebody is caught doing something wrong, they instinctively blame the person that caught them. So, little kid, I didn't start the fight, you did. Or a cheating spouse will accuse the faithful spouse of being unfaithful. There's Elijah, and he finally meets Ahab, and Ahab says, "Is that you troubler of Israel?" Mm-hmm. And Elijah says, "Excuse me, you're the one that's worshiping the pagan gods. You're the troubler of Israel." But Ahab had the audacity to accuse the prophet of God of the problem. When Paul was in the temple praying, the Pharisees saw him, stirred up a riot. They grab Paul. They're pulling him apart. They shove him out. They close the doors of the temple, and the Roman police have to come down and rescue Paul. So Paul has to go to a trial. Acts 24, Tertullus began to accuse Paul, saying, "We have found this man a pestilent fellow, a mover of sedition among the Jews, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes who's gone about to profane the temple." And Paul says, "They neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people, nor in the synagogue, nor in the city. Neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me." It was the Pharisees that stirred up the insurrection at the Capitol in Jerusalem, yet they had the audacity to blame this innocent Paul. Nero set fire to Rome, and he blamed the Christians. They even did it to Jesus himself. Here are these Pharisees, and they're fathers of the devil, right? And they accused Jesus of being demon-possessed. He cast out devils by the prince of devils, and Adam did it to God, right? Adam sinned. And he tells God, well, it's the woman you gave me. It's really your fault behind it all. And so I was reading a Military Review article, and this was from December of 1960, volume 11, number 9, and the article is a review of Soviet psychological warfare. And in there, it says that this is an example of propaganda technique called name-calling. It is also what psychologists call projection. If you do something wrong, accuse the enemy of doing it before he accuses you. It's particularly effective when the charge is false. The one who makes it first has the advantage, because many people will believe any charge they hear without investigation. He goes on, a person or ascribes his motives to his opposition. And we have all heard children claim, he hit me first, in order to escape blame for a fight. Yeah. So union behaves this way. So here we have this tactic in 1960 where the guilty person accuses the innocent person of what the guilty person is guilty of. And in Chicago, David Axelrod, he was a campaign advisor to a previous president who was a Alinsky organizer in Chicago. On NPR radio, April 19, 2010, he said, in Chicago, there was an old tradition of throwing a brick through your own campaign office window and then calling a press conference to say you've been attacked. So you do the bad stuff, but you blame your innocent opponent. They have to deny it. I didn't do it. But the media just looks for the association of your name with the crime. And then when you deny it, it says this person's denying the crime. Well, they're still repeating your name in the crime. And people subconsciously make a connection. Where there's smoke, there's fire. But this idea of blaming others, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and she approved Uranium One deal, which transferred a fifth of the U.S. uranium to Russia. And at the same time, money from Russian-affiliated groups gave money, approximately $145 million, to her Clinton Foundation. The New York Times, this is not a conservative paper. The New York Times headline, cash flowed to Clinton Foundation amid Russian uranium deal.
Wow.
Hillary Clinton was colluding with Russia. And so this is another headline. It says, New York Times, Hillary Clinton approves Russia uranium deal after $2 million donation to the Clinton Foundation. Well, she pays for a Steele dossier to accuse Trump of exactly what she's guilty of, to accuse Trump of colluding colluding with Russia. When it finally comes back that she paid for the Steele dossier, all she has to do is pay a $113,000 fine to the FEC, a hand slap. Meanwhile, Trump had to go through years of investigations and impeachment trials. And then if they finally pointed back at Hillary, by that time the water's muddied. The public doesn't know who to trust, and she gets a pass. Mm-hmm. And so the investigation process, where the Department of Justice is subpoenaing all the evidence, they just use it to get all the evidence that could convict Hillary and destroy the evidence. Smash laptops and smash cell phones and smash hard drives and delete, erase. That's all the investigation process was to destroy the evidence that could convict Hillary. Joe Biden is on C-SPAN bragging about extorting Ukraine. I told them, unless they stop investigating my son Hunter, I'm going to hold back billions of dollars of U.S. aid. It's an admission of extortion. And he goes, you know what? By the end of the day, they fired that prosecutor. He should have been put in jail for extortion. But what did they do? They accused Trump of extorting Ukraine. And then they knew that Biden had classified documents in his garage illegally. And they all had to do with Ukraine. And so rather than let it become public and Biden get in trouble, they staged a very visible raid on Trump at Mar-a-Lago. They knew that he had records. They knew exactly where they were. They knew they were locked up. They didn't care. They just wanted the headlines. Trump classified documents, really big all across. And then when it finally comes out that Biden and Pence and others had classified documents. By that time, it's old news, and they get a pass. And after pressure, they finally put an investigator on it. The investigator says that Biden was guilty, but because he's an old man, I'm not going to press charges. Mm-hmm. It's like, what? I mean, and so the idea is they blame you for what they're guilty of. It's this projection. Even before Trump, Mitt Romney's running for president. Harry Reid, a senator from Nevada, says that Romney did not pay his taxes. And it causes negative press. Romney loses after the election. Time magazine is interviewing Harry Reid. And they said, we did fact-checking, and Romney did pay all his taxes. And Harry Reid said, I lied about Romney, but he didn't win, did he? Mm-hmm. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. There's no God. There's no right or wrong. It's just a political tactic. And so the Charlie Hurt on Fox News, Hannity, May 23rd, 2019, said, this whole thing is like this game of projection. Whatever they accuse President Trump of doing, we then find out not only did President Trump not do it, but they did it. Even Elon Musk last month was on the Tucker Carlson network on X. It was actually October 7th, 2024. Musk said, they deflect attention away from themselves. It's sort of like a preemptive moral strike. Those who are saying that Trump is a threat to democracy are themselves actually the threat to democracy. And Nancy Pelosi called it the wrap-up smear. So here she's doing all this corrupt stuff, and she says, it's a diversionary tactic. You demonize and then the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods, and then it's reported in the press. And so these tactics were actually developed during the Cold War. So after World War II, you had countries in Europe and India and Egypt, and they're forming little republics and electing little leaders, and they're getting themselves back on their feet. But the KGB did not like this. And so they would send KGB agents into countries to do what's called critical theory. They would simply observe all the groups. The one KGB defector, Yuri Bezmenov, says the James Bond movies, it's really, in actual fact, it's not that sexy. He says KGB agents just simply study a country and observe all the groups and categorize them as victims and oppressors, haves and have-nots, economically, racially, religiously, socially, and then they would pit them against each other, and they would cause problems, and then they would co-opt the media to blame the leader of the country for all the problems, and when the leader's popularity fell, they would do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet. And people would say, well, I saw these polls that they had faked to make it look like it was a close race, and I didn't like that leader anyway because I believed all the fake news, and so I'm not going to make a big deal out of the fact that he's replaced with somebody that says all the right things, but in reality they were a Soviet puppet. And so these are called color revolutions, and they would even have people dress up as their opponents to cause disturbances that the media could pick up and blame the opponent. And there was even a book called Let Them Call Me Rebel, Saul Alinsky, and it says, in 1972, students asked Alinsky to plan a protest of a scheduled speech by George H.W. Bush, then U.S. Representative to the United Nations during the Vietnam War. He told them to go to the rally and dress as members of the Ku Klux Klan, and whenever Bush said something in defense of the Vietnam War, they should stand up and cheer and wave placards reading, the KKK supports Bush. And this is what the students did very successfully. Wow. So whenever you see a group and there are people that are saying, oh, they're Nazis and they're KKK and they're supporting, those are leftists dressed up as the opposite because they want to malign. And
we're going to take a quick break. Bill Federer with us today. And friends, did we not see this? The stories coming out even on January 6th with those who had put on pro-Trump gear underneath their clothing so that they could be viewed as being somebody who was a pro-Trumper, but instead they were an agitator. More information after the break. This is Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how did Darwin come up with the idea of evolution?
Chris Charles Darwin was actually preparing to be a pastor. His real interest, however, was in the study of nature. Sometimes school kids are taught that Darwin was a believer in creation until he went to the Galapagos and saw that the facts of nature pointed otherwise. This is not true. Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a renowned scientist and poet back in the 1700s. He was also a vicious anti-Christian. In 1770, he began to promote evolutionary ideas. When Charles Darwin wrote his book Origin of Species, he repeated the main examples of evolution used by his grandfather. He rejected Scripture in favor of his grandfather's evolutionary ideas, and thereby affected the whole Western world. How much better if he had gone back to Genesis and seen the truth that's recorded there.
Thanks, Dr. John. William J. Federer, our guest here for a second day on Crosstalk and dealing with this topic of gaslighting, projection. Could it be happening today? Those on the left side of the legacy media, such as MSNBC, and I would say they're on the left side of the legacy media, they became completely unglued this past Sunday when former President Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City. But before we get to the MSNBC clip, leading up to this rally was Hillary Clinton on CNN some days ago talking about Trump reenacting Hitler's rally at Madison Square Garden. Here's what she had to say on CNN.
And, you know, one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it. Now,
can't ignore it, and saying, you know, how he is reenacting this fascist rally, this Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden. Then back to MSNBC. As this rally was going on this past weekend, MSNBC actually superimposed video from the 1939 Hitler rally over Trump's rally, but this is how they opened their interview segment on MSNBC. Listen in.
You've quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump.
I tell you what, let me get the right clip. Here we go.
Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden comes days after his own former chief of staff went on record to describe his former boss as a fascist. But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, Adolf Hitler, packed the garden for a so-called pro-America rally, a rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners. When a Jewish protester rushed the stage, the Associated Press reported, quote, instantly, a dozen or more stormtroopers set upon him, knocking him down and beating him as he held his head in his arms. Most of his clothing was torn from his body. Later, he was booked for disorderly conduct. Now, against that backdrop of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants, is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism.
Okay, Bill, your comments on what we just heard here, because they were totally trying to equate this rally this past weekend with Adolf Hitler, and he even called him, from MSNBC, called him a different fascist leader.
Right, well, Nazi stands for National Socialist Workers' Party. Socialist. And so there was no individual rights. Ask the Jews. Trump has supported Jews. He's the first president that moved the capital, had the U.S. recognize the capital of Israel as Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. He has been tremendously pro-Jewish, pro-Israel, even his family members being Jewish, some of them. And so, again, this is projection. They're telling you exactly what the Democrats are planning. The Democrats are planning to be fascists. they're the ones that want to arrest people. They're the ones that, and they're doing it now. You go out to California, parents that do not like their children being indoctrinated with a trans agenda, they're arresting the parents. They actually passed a law by Democrat Gavin Newsom that if the school thinks the child is supposed to transition from a boy to a girl and the parents are not going to support it, it's the law. The school simply does not let the children go home. And the parents don't know, where's my kid? Well, we can't tell you. And then they can take the child away from the family. In Colorado, the Democrats passed this exact law. And there's a lady where her 14-year-old daughter saw an art club sign, goes there. It's a trans indoctrination thing. After 90 minutes, this girl goes home and tells her parents she's trans. The parents call the school. The school calls the Child Protective Services that go to the house and threaten to take the daughter away from the house. I mean, these are things that Democrats are doing, very fascist, yet they have the audacity to try. And George Washington's farewell address, he warned that this would happen. Now, this is way back in 1796. He says, real patriots who may resist the intrigues are liable to become suspected and odious, while the tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. So he's saying real patriots who are not going to go along with this, they're going to be called suspect and odious, but the people that are really betraying the country, they're going to be doing it with their applause. And so, again, these are tactics that have been used throughout history. They're accusing their opponents of what they're guilty of.
You know, Bill,
the same mainstream media. Anyway.
Yeah, and let me just say this, and I'll let you continue on here too, but it was interesting on this MSNBC, this interview that was happening while the rally was going on. They're doing that. They bring up audio to make it sound, like hear the screaming voice in the background. But again, they brought on guests from like The Atlantic, comparing Trump to Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. They referred to that article that had been written there by at The Atlantic. But they also expressed concern that Trump was taking people to the next level, to the next step, to incite violence if he does not win. And I thought, Bill, there's projection going on there as well.
Right. So we have to realize, even January 6th, more has come out that the FBI had operatives in the crowd instigating them to break into the Capitol, that there's videos of people going into the bushes and putting on a Trump T-shirt and coming out of the bushes saying we got to break into the Capitol. There's a guy named Ray Epps, and he's on video saying we have to break into the Capitol, and he's texting. I'm orchestrating this whole thing. And for a year, he's not even on the FBI list to arrest. And when they finally get him, they just do a little hand slap and let him go. And then you have, interestingly enough, on a global level, Peter Thiel, anybody will acknowledge Trump is not a globalist. He wants to make America great again. Globalists don't like that. They want a one-world government, and they want to destroy anybody that wants to prevent a one-world government. But here's Peter Thiel, founder of PayPal. He's giving a Stanford Classical Liberalism lecture November 18th, 2022. And he says, the zeitgeist, or the attitude on the other side, is we're not going to make it for another century on this planet. Therefore, we need to embrace a one-world totalitarian state right now. Whatever the dangers are in the future, we need never underestimate the danger of a one-world totalitarian state. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, he's quoting a scripture, the political slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety. I want to suggest we would do well to be a little more scared of the Antichrist and a little less scared of Armageddon. In other words, don't be afraid of the world ending. Be afraid of the people that want to save you from the world ending. All these globalists, they're like, oh, well, you have to surrender your freedoms, and we're going to save the world from climate change. We're going to save the world from economic problems, and be afraid of the people that promise to save you, right? Because they're the globalists. They're the ones that want to usurp power. So it's a fascinating topic. I cover this in my book, Socialism, how they do the wrong stuff and then they blame their opponents. And again, it's called projection.
Bill, a fascist is also someone who tries to suppress the opposition and try to suppress criticism. And I happen to think, isn't that what social media is doing to former President Trump? I don't hear of them censoring Kamala Harris. I mean, the recent interview with Joe Rogan has been attacked by social media and deplatformed in some areas. Here is, matter of fact, Pamela Geller had this election interference, Google censoring Joe Rogan Donald Trump interview. I have people who try and post crosstalk programs out through their social media channels. Guess what? They're pulled down. We get this, this disinformation or misinformation does not meet, community standards or on, whatever the excuses are going to be. But a fascist is somebody who tries to suppress the opposition, does not want that voice to be heard. And that's exactly what we see coming against conservatives.
About a month or so ago, I had the chance to visit with someone who had been an Army officer. He had been in intelligence in an area called psychological operations. And he was in the Middle East, in Latin, South America, and he would talk about how they would want to sway the public opinion of a country away from the Islamists or away from, communists or whatever. And so he even talked about the one place they were at, there was an imam that was causing them problems. And if they killed the imam, then the people would get even more riled up. And so they decided to have a parade in town, and they're with loudspeakers saying great things about this imam, and they lay a basket of fruit at his doorstep, and they're like, we want to thank this imam for helping Americans. He said by the time we got back to the base, he was taken care of. In other words, the Muslims believed that he was helping the Americans, and they killed him. But it's this idea that how do you sway the public? And so what happened was, he was telling me, he said in 2015, Obama turned all these tools that the government was using to keep countries from becoming, pro-Iranian or, pro-communist. Obama turned those inwardly and was using them on the American people. And so I Googled it, and sure enough, Obama signed an article, an executive order, September 15th, 2015. It's called Using Behavioral Science Insights to Better Serve the American People. And he's giving himself authority to use psyops on the American people.
Right.
And this former officer was saying that he basically has taken all the stuff that we used to do to influence other countries. He's now using it for political purposes on the inside of America. And then in 2016, Obama signed the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act, which gave him the authority to decide what's disinformation and to censor it. And so this was an article. It says, Countering Foreign Propaganda. Before the 2016 Christmas holiday, President Obama quietly signed the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. Deep within this act is a controversial provision which establishes a global engagement center under the State Department and consolidates power of several federal broadcasting entities. The consolidation of power creates some concerns regarding journalistic independence and credibility for media outlets. And so a gentleman named Michael Waller wrote a book called Big Intel, How Cold War Heroes Became Spy Villains. He goes on, he says, how the left subverted the CIA and the FBI. The dramatic story of Cold War historics of the CIA, followed by their slide into Marxism-influenced deep state. Once upon a time, the FBI, CIA fought America's enemies. Now they are tools of the growing police state, attacking the left's political enemies, spying on ordinary American citizens, even parents who push back against radical sexual agendas in the public schools. How did we get here? And so just recently, Google agreed to a $110 million deal to fund local newsrooms. So now even our local news is being censored and spoon-fed to us from a government-controlled perspective.
William J. Federer is with us today here on Crosstalk, dealing with this matter of projection, and we have seen so many examples from years past. Could it be happening today? Friends, we'll let you make that decision, but we'll be back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
The Bible says that life is but a vapor that's here for a short time and then vanishes away. Scripture also says it's appointed unto man once to die, but after this, the judgment. Have you ever wondered what happens when you die? In the book, What Happens After Life, author Ron Rhodes provides a survey of the Bible's teachings about the afterlife. He tracks the destiny for those who know Christ as Savior and the destiny for unbelievers. He addresses numerous topics, such as the immediate state after death, believers and the judgment seat of Christ, unbelievers and the great white throne judgment, the new heavens and a new earth, the new Jerusalem, and so much more. He even tackles the question of what happens to infants, young children, and those mentally disabled as it relates to eternity. What Happens After Life is available for a donation of $15 or more by calling VCY at 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, dealing with this matter of projection. Others have used terms like gaslighting and getting people to think they're going crazy when, filling them full of untruth and lies and deception in order to get the others to believe things. And sometimes the more you say things, and this is why we have been hearing over and over comparisons to Donald Trump being Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin. Bill, just another current example, Michelle Obama. This was just on FoxNews.com on October 27th. And a story here, Michelle Obama accuses critics of picking apart Harris's interview answers to distract from Trump's faults, and accusing people of you're taking things from Kamala Harris, what she's saying, you're just picking that apart when instead you should be focusing on Trump's faults. And I found that very interesting, because isn't this what they've been doing to Donald Trump, just picking apart statements, taking one statement from one speech, another from another speech, and trying to equate things and making him say things as if he is saying things that are just not accurate, taking phrases out of context from his responses and statements?
Yeah. I took a screenshot of an MSNBC article, and the title was Mika Brzezinski, quote, "It is our job to control what people think." And then you had Biden meet with the TikTok stars to help sway public opinion regarding the Ukraine war. And it's like, so you mentioned the term gaslighting. Many people aren't familiar. In 1944, there was a Ingrid Bergman movie, and in this, she's playing the niece of a famous actress who was given jewels from the royalty, and then the actress dies, and this Ingrid Bergman character inherits the house with all the actress's stuff in the attic. But it's too emotional, so she locks the attic door, but this one guy knows that there's jewels there, and so he befriends Ingrid Bergman, and he dates her and courts her and then marries her. And then they're in the flat there, in London, the apartment where, they have those tall buildings, and there's like lots of them together. And he says, I'm going to go for a walk, and you just go, stay in the bedroom, and I'm going to smoke my pipe. And he leaves, and he goes down the block, climbs with the fire escape, goes on the roof, goes across a couple different ones, and then he finds his, and he opens it up, goes down into the attic, and he turns on the gas lamp. And when the gas lamp goes on in the attic, it gets dimmer in her bedroom, because there's only, one pipe that goes into the house with the gas. And he comes back, and she says, whenever you go for the walk up, the light in my bedroom gets dimmer. And he's like, you're seeing things. Your eyes are playing tricks on you. I think the stress is getting to you. I think we need to take you to a psychiatrist. I think we need to let you be admitted to the hospital. And he's about to sign her away and lock her up, and then he can dig in the attic all he wants. But there's a guy across the street, and he sees every night the light gets on in the attic, and it gets dimmer in the bedroom, and he just happens to wander over, and he breaks the story, and they arrest the guy and take him away. But that went into our vernacular, and it's called gaslighting. And it's this where it's done not just on a individual level, but it can be done on a national level. And so these tactics are being used on the public. And I even have Joseph Goebbels was the minister of propaganda for the National Socialist Workers' Party. And he realized that you could sway public opinion by controlling the media. And he says, think of the media as a great keyboard upon which the government can play. And so that's the idea. They want to control what the public thinks and sway them for a political agenda. It goes back in my book, I talk about it. Marketing in the 1900s was Sears catalog, and they would list everything about a sewing machine. And then in the 1900s, or the 20th century, you had magazine ads, and a guy named Edward Bernays pioneered marketing in magazines. And he said, you don't have to say anything about a product. You just make it look like everybody's using it. And people are social creatures. And he got the idea from his uncle, Sigmund Freud, a psychoanalyst, who found out that we are social creatures. We want to be accepted. We do not want to be rejected. And so the classic is Crisco. Nobody knew what was in Crisco. They invented a word, vegetable-based. And they advertised it so well, making it look like everybody's using it with this really delicious-looking chicken and happy families, that it put out of business the lard industry. And you know what's in Crisco? It's cottonseed oil. In the Deep South, they'd harvest cotton, mountains of this black seeds that they would mush into industrial seed oil that they would use in factories and machinery. Nobody ate that stuff, but somebody had the idea of bleaching it, putting these containers, and we've all eaten it. And so you go from knowing everything about a Singer sewing machine to nothing about a product, but you're ingesting it because it looks like everybody else is using it.
Yeah.
And so Edward Bernays says, women's shoes. He says women go into a department store and think they're picking out shoes. They're not. The shoes were picked out for them by the marketing executive who paid the actress to put them on, who paid the photographer to take the pictures, and the women see it in the magazine and they want it. He goes, in this way, women are controlled in their private lives by this marketing executive. And so he writes a book called The Engineering of Consent. So we are a country, like the Declaration, governed from the consent of the governed. But what if you could engineer consent? And you make it look like everybody's going along with something. And so that's the tactic. They've taken marketing of products to marketing of ideologies. And they're very effective at it. And the whole key is we're social creatures, and we want to wear the clothes that everybody else is we see wearing, and we want to wear the cologne, and we want to hold the political views that we think everybody else is holding.
Our program today with Bill Federer, gaslighting and projection, could it be happening today? What's your reaction to that, friends? Our phone number to Crosstalk today, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. By the way, again, Bill's book yesterday that we talked about, Silence Equals Consent, The Sin of Omission. We have that available through Crosstalk, our way of saying thank you for your support of $20 or more. Some of the things we've been talking today is his book on socialism, the real history from Plato to the present, how the deep state capitalizes on crises to consolidate control. We also have that available through Crosstalk. It's available at crosstalkamerica.com. Click on store, or you can reach out to our switchboard at 1-800-729-9829. His book entitled Socialism, and of course yesterday's topic, Silence Equals Consent. Taking your calls here today on Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. I found it also interesting, Bill. I mean, even international media picking up on things. Israel National News just ran a story of Kamala Harris going after Trump, saying he can't even finish a thought. She's been known to be the queen of word salads, yet she is saying that President Trump cannot even finish a thought.
Right. Again, that is exactly projection. That's them blaming us, or their opponents for what they're doing, and it's very effective. And again, little kids do it. I didn't start the fight; you did. Mm-hmm. There's a video, and many people may have seen it. But it has a newsroom, and the person says, some people are forwarding articles without checking the sources, and this is very dangerous to democracy. And then it zooms out, and you see another newscaster saying the exact same words, and another, until pretty soon there's 100 of them across the screen. And this is very dangerous to democracy. It's like, wait a second. You are the ones that are dangerous to democracy. You're all just reading from a script, and you're just doing what the wealthy people that have the money that own the stations are telling you. You know, George Soros just bought 200 stations, mostly Hispanic. Now, you know, probably better than anybody else, all the red tape you have to go through. They cut all through that just to have them hurry up and buy these things. And so they want to form the beliefs of the country by making it look like everybody's going along with it. And I think it's about time that we call people out and don't go along with it.
Yeah, our lines are packed here. And by the way, we even had aired the clip of the FCC Commissioner Carr, who spoke against this fast track for Soros. And it was amazing to see how quickly they went through this. But can you imagine, friends, as many of these stations are even ones that have conservative thought and talk shows on them as well? Do you think they're going to survive? Let's go to the phone lines. We've got Scott calling from Clarksburg, West Virginia. Scott, you're on the air.
Yeah, I have a comment. The left's psychological tactics are used to separate people from whatever ties them to the past and makes them resist change. These ties are generally not rational but emotional. So by appealing to people's emotions, they make their targets see the past in a new light as something tyrannical, ugly, or immoral. So they have room to infiltrate new ideas and brainwash them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And Bill, this is why we're changing history, rewriting history books and tearing down statues and just going through we have to remove Columbus Day and instead have Indigenous Peoples Day and on. The rewriting is going on. The brainwashing is occurring.
Yeah, the caller brought out a very important point. They tap into the emotions, and it's sort of like you're always going to defend your alma mater, the high school you went to. And whether the team is good or bad, you're emotionally tied to that. And so the idea is that you want to get people emotionally invested in a political view, and then their logic goes out the window. This was used during the Korean War. Now, soldiers made it through prison camps in World War II. You know, Hogan's Heroes and all that. But in the Korean War, they would isolate the prisoners for months until they got to this vulnerable emotional place where they just craved wanting to talk to another human being and be one of the buddies and get a slap on the back. And when they were in this vulnerable emotional spot, they would bring them into a room of guys who had already caved. And before they could be accepted in this group, they had to reject America and say, yeah, I agree, America's terrible, terrible, terrible. And they go, all right, you're one of us. And when they were rescued, they still hated America.
Wow.
Like, what happened? It went into their emotion.
Yeah.
And so when you want to push an agenda, you isolate the entire population, social distance them, lock them in their homes until they crave wanting to just interact, go out to dinner, go shopping, and then say, before you do, you got to inject this into your body, you got to wear this on your face, you got to let us track you everywhere you go, you got to give up all your freedoms. They're like, yeah, whatever, I just want to get back to normal, right? And so they're using these psychological tactics on the entire nation.
We've got Veronica calling from Arizona, and Veronica, you're on the air.
Thank you. America is at the crossroads, and it will be either World Economic Forum, which is a Nazi Fourth Reich agenda in disguise of global unity. Mm-hmm. I wonder why is Trump not stronger exposing January 6th? They hide the tapes. They've done so much lies, like you spoke on the air. The people deserve to know. People, I know it's about money. Media is the enemy of the people, but some people will never wake up until they see the actual evidence that January 6th was inside job and how people dress up in MAGA and beat up someone. And even Justice Smollett was caught. Still, it's not enough talk about it on the media. I believe we should focus on America as a country that is dying instead of looking for personalities, which most of people are voting for person instead of for our country. And I believe Trump should call current administration way stronger. He should call them domestic terrorists because that's who they are.
Veronica, thank you for the comment here. We're up against a break. We'll have a comment afterwards. Back in 1 minute, you're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. Ready for some good news? The Institute for Faith and Culture has conducted a survey of what they describe as self-described Christians. Now, some of these are Protestants, meaning the survey results lead you to believe it's more like mainline Christians, some of them not so conservative. Others described as evangelicals and others as Catholics. The good news is that 85% of these self-described Christians say that they are voting in the 2024 presidential election. Like I said, there is some bad news, of which 31% of these self-described Christians believe that Christians should stay out of politics. That's not good, and that's actually not possible. If you vote, you're involved in politics. You stop at a red light, you're involved in the affairs of the city. That's what politics means, the affairs of the cities. And, of course, Christians should be involved. But the good news, 85% are going to vote.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Bill Federer is our guest today, and talking about projection, talking about gaslighting. And could it be happening today? Bill, that caller before the break said, we need to wake up at what's going on here. Why is not Donald Trump, talking more about January 6th and exposing it? Now, isn't this something that Speaker Johnson has sought to do when they found that all of this evidence gathering that this commission did beforehand had been destroyed? And the more evidence that has come out, it's been pulling teeth to actually get the information, and some of that has been exposed.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson one day aired the videotapes from the Capitol on January 6th, and there were just people peacefully walking through, taking pictures, staying within the lines. It destroyed the entire narrative that they had tried to produce. And both Schumer and McConnell pressured Fox to fire Tucker Carlson. And so there's this cover-up, and Congress should release these videos and make a big deal out of it. The caller, I didn't catch her story, but her accent made it seem like she was from another country. I think, in a way, God is sending people from other countries here who have experienced totalitarianism, who've experienced communism, who've experienced gangs and dictatorships of Latin, South America, Cuba, right? And sending them here as like Jonah prophet saying, wake up, America, you are asleep. Yeah. We've come from places that you don't want to go to. You're headed in the wrong direction.
We got lines packed here. Greg in Minnesota, you're next. Go ahead, you're on the air.
All right, thanks for taking my call. I had a comment about the rally at Madison Square Garden. Now, the New York Rangers play at Madison Square Garden, so would the Rangers and all those spectators also be Nazis, or anyone else who was at Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, any kind of rally or event being held there, but to know they had to center this one out and say reenacting a Nazi rally from 1939. So great point.
Even the Democrats, I think, had rallies there too.
Thank you, Greg. Deborah is calling from Milwaukee. You're on the air.
Oh, I like to ask your guest, does he think that Madison Square Garden was a setup? I think Trump just lost the election. He lost that black and Hispanic vote. He lost the last election because he didn't get that all-important black and Hispanic vote. I like to ask his comment about that.
Okay, I believe his Hispanic vote has really been on the increase, and some of the other demographics as well. Your comment, Bill.
Yeah, I just saw a TikTok video this morning from a lady who's from Cuba, and she said that they took that joke out of context. She says that you could tell they were just kidding, comedians just kid, and she said that if you were there, you would not have been offended, and the press is just taking to try to make a big deal out of it. They do say that Trump has an astounding 28% of the black support, which is phenomenal. And so they're trying to do division. So this is a divide and conquer tactic where if you have an opponent, you want to try to get a division in there. You want to sow. It's like, how do you destroy a marriage? Sow division. How do you destroy a family? Sow division. How do you destroy a church? Sow division. How do you destroy a political movement? Sow division. How do you destroy a country? Sow division. So they want to try to break away the different groups from Trump support. I recognize that was what they were trying to do with their coverage of Madison Square Garden. I think, especially like with this lady with her TikTok video, that it's getting cold water poured on it. I don't think it's going to be successful. And
thank you,
but
Dipper. Yeah, I tell you what, we've got just a couple minutes left. Kyle in New Mexico, you're on the air.
Hi. Yesterday you came down pretty hard on a guy, and so I decided to check it out. And it seems like maybe you guys are gaslighting, because that supposed law in California is 2023 SB 107, and it actually says exactly the opposite, that no one under the age of 18 can even get counseling on being transgender.
Oh my! Sir,
without the permission of the parent.
You're wrong on that, Kyle. You are wrong on that. And California has become a sanctuary state for those who are transgender. Bill, a further comment.
Yeah. Go out there. I've been out there a dozen times this year. The parents are shocked that they don't even use the terms father and mother in the schools. They have to use parent. That the whole thing is drag queen story hour, that they're indoctrinating these little kids. They've had over 14,000 children go through transgendered surgeries, and they find out now that they're more suicidal after they go through the surgery. And yes, I've talked to parents that are shocked. At Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, I was there speaking, and they said that they were pushing a bill where the parents have to be informed if the child is going through transition at school. If everybody in the school has to use the new pronouns, they at least need to tell the parents. And they said, no, the school does not have to tell the parents that their child is going through transition at the school. And then the parents began to meet and to protest, and they threatened to arrest the parents at the school board meeting. And so this is going on, so you have to dig a little deeper than just doing a couple Google searches. Actually talk to people who live in California.
Yeah. Talk to your pro-family organizations there, too.
You can't pronounce any kind of actual reference. Actually talk to people.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. And getting some delay impact there, but talk to your pro-family organizations, Capital Research Center, and
California Family Policy Council.
California Family Policy Council. They'll be able to guide you. A quick Merle in Tennessee.
Group in California.
Merle, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Why, recently the left tried to project that they were the true patriots. Georgie Stephanopoulos and ABC said the deep state is loaded with patriots. Also, they come out with a survey of the most patriotic states. They were all blue states, including Oregon and Washington.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, thank you. Same places where they got the fires going on in the ballot boxes. Bill Federer, our guest here today. Bill, we've got down less than half a minute. What would you like to leave with the listeners?
The concept that we're social creatures, we want to be accepted, we don't want to be rejected. They do what they call the pyramid of oppression. They go into the classroom and they say the cisgendered, and that's their term for somebody that believes there's a man and a woman. The cisgendered are on the top of the pyramid. They're the oppressors, and underneath of them are the asexual, bisexual, transsexual, homosexual, pansexual, and they ask the kids, which ones are you? Well, none of the kids want to pick the cisgendered on top. They're the oppressors, so they'll pick anything else. They've had a 5,000% increase in trans-identifying children in the last 4 years. Wow. It works. Kids want to fit in. They've weaponized this.
Bill Federer, our guest here today. AmericanMinute.com, the website, AmericanMinute.com. Bill, thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you.
And friends, share the information as you can with others. God bless you. Thanks for listening to Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.